So the pianoforte method begins like any other method. We recognize that we're introducing this grand instrument, the piano, to a child. The thing that's different is that only the things a student needs at the time is introduced. So there is no extra superfluous information at the beginning, just what they need. This begins with the right hand and the left hand. And then, of course, finger numbers. They need these straight away in all the pieces that they play. So a good solid review, introduction and review on this. Now, this is where the method is different than others in that it introduces singing. Now, you do not have to be an amazing singer to teach this method. You don't even have to be a strong singer to teach this method. This book does not turn piano lessons into singing lessons. It simply uses the voice to help us engage with sound and help us internalize the way sound works. So we're introduced to singing with a little exercise of how to warm up the voice. You can sound completely silly when you teach this. You do not have to sound good. And then we get to know the basic geography of the piano in terms of white keys and black keys. Not letter names yet, just the black keys and the white keys, literally the patterns of the keyboard. This is all we need to get started. And we begin with these two solfa syllables, so and mi. Now, if you know the do, re, mi scale, even if you're just conjuring it up from listening to the sound of music, you can find the pitch sound for so and mi. You can find it on the piano with your student or before a lesson, so and mi. And then you can play it by ear, or sing it by ear. So, me. And we use these Kerwin hand signs to help bring a kinesthetic element to learning these concepts. The very first lesson is very simple, but very rich in what it brings to a student, and it can happen on the first lesson. So we have these syllables that we've already learned, and we have the finger numbers and the keyboard geography, and we're able to play this straight away. And they can play it in these three positions. This gives them two different really wonderful exercises. It gives them the chance to practice this piece 3 times. It gives them the chance to transpose without even knowing it. In addition to that, we're starting with finger number 3. And finger number 3 is the absolute best way to develop good hand and arm alignment and to begin to build a nice structure. I'll demonstrate with my hand, just a nice structure, this sort of domed structure we want in the hand. It takes time, but using the third finger in the beginning is the best way to do this. This is usually first lesson. Children can go home and practice this even without assistance from an adult. And we've done basic singing, nothing too fancy. When a student comes back second week after they've spent a week practicing flying birds, we introduce the concept of the pulse. Of course, as musicians, we know this is called pulse. It's introduced in this method with the term music heartbeats. And I know a lot of us teach it this way, even with the heart symbols. Pianoforte uses this heart symbol concept for quite a while, and it really helps children just understand that we have a running pulse underneath things that happen on top of it, fast words and short words, fast notes and short sounds. So we have this little chant that has a little tune, and we can spend quite a lot of time on this in the lesson, have a lot of fun with it, bring out instruments, and begin to experience the concept of pulse. Because on top of that, we introduce the first note values, which is the crotchet and the quarter note. I'm an American, but I live in Britain, so I've used both terms. And so you can use both or just choose the one that you're going to use most often. And we use these spoken sounds to help us count them, and then a little bit of theory work for them to do. And then we have another chant to engage musically with the concept of the quarter note, the crotchet, straight away. This is a really fun little chant. And then we introduce the half half note, or as we call it in Britain, the minim, and with the idea that it's a longer sound held over 2 beats. Now this is pretty self-explanatory for all of us that have been teaching anywhere around the idea of music heartbeats. Again, it has a chant to engage straight away with these note values. And then we go straight into another song, which will be their homework for the week, which is called My Bike. It's so similar to Flying Birds that it builds directly from Flying Birds, with the exception that now, instead of just text, we actually have note values, and we can practice counting. So we can say ta, ta, tu. Now, I take an aside here because I know a lot of Kodaly teachers use different ways of saying the minim. So we might say ta, tu, or ta, ah. I say tu because it's a long sustained sound, which is what we want to create when we have a minim, because the minim isn't actually two values. So it's not ta, ah, it's tu. So that's how I teach it. You can, of course, adapt that if it works better with you. Again, we have the opportunity to transpose and using the third finger. So when a student comes back after this lesson, they've had 2 weeks of some really strong basics, and they completely understand what's going on. After we've really had time with the concept of pulse and a music heartbeat, we introduce the concept of time signature. So we're now dividing this ongoing pulse into different amounts. So 4, 3, 2, 6, and we do this with bar lines. Kids get this, it's really easy because they can count. And immediately after that, we add la. Now, if you're new to teaching with Moveable Do Solfa, if you're new to teaching with solfa and Kodaly, literally just go to the piano, find la in a C scale, which is the A, and just have a play with the way these sound, and try singing it by ear using this little diagram, which is very, very pre-notation with the lines and the space. So they're starting to see it, even though they don't know that that's what they're seeing. And then the song to send home this week incorporates this new information, including this new way of writing time signature. Now, don't be alarmed. In level 3, we get rid of the bottom number, but for levels 1 and 2, we get rid of the heart timing and add a number, and it becomes a proper time signature. But in the beginning, we just want them to understand that we have to count to 4 or 3 or whatever in every bar, and how the note values work. Now, this is a very interesting and extremely valuable point. We add the finger 4. Instead of going 2, 3, we add the finger 4. And the reason this is done is to maintain, and I'll try to demonstrate, maintain this hand alignment without any type of twisting. And believe it or not, a child can easily play 3, 4. They can play 3, 2 easily, but they can play 3, 4, and it starts to create this opening up of the hand, this gentle rotation. Technique takes time, but you will find that over the months, when children develop in this way, their hand alignment becomes extremely natural without any twisting. And just trust that using the 4 so early on is valuable, and that they can do it even when they're very young and very small. The next musical concept that we introduce is a concept of tempo. And this is done with a fun chant that we can come away from the piano, bring out the instruments, bring out the xylophones, the drums, stomping, scarves, march around the room, because we accelerando on spider on the web, and they can feel the idea of going from slow until fast. We introduce this with no musical terms yet, not the Italian terms, just slow, medium, or fast to help them engage. Then, as they go through, you can have a quick look, same principle, just introducing the whole note / semi-brief. As we go through now, all of our music, even into level 2 and into level 3, we're given the prompt to choose a tempo. And what I find is really interesting is a child understands the word tempo and never forget what it means. And so I can say, what do you think the tempo should be on Slow Cat? And they're able to choose slow, medium, or fast. And it also helps them engage in musicality, musicianship, and what they think the story of the music is. Interestingly, and I always find this extremely, it just really interests me, is children don't always choose slow for this song because they have a different idea of the words and how it means and how it feels. Sometimes they choose fast tempo. And I think that's really fascinating because it is immediately engaging a child's musical imagination. So the next big rhythmic concept is, of course, the eighth notes or the quavers, with the idea that we have two quicker sounds on one heartbeat. Kids get this. It's easy for them to understand. We use TT, which is so common throughout Kodaly methodology. And there's a little chant that we can sing with them that uses actual words to help them engage with how this feels. So cake, cake, I love cake. I personally always have children keep pulse and say rhythm, so that they're doing the two things at once. Now, from here on out, the book is quite explanatory. It just sort of builds on the concepts. We introduce a new concept, we keep all of the old elements, and we build on it. They go home with the ability to practice each new piece in 3 different versions. If we're keeping different pieces from before, they might go home with 3 pieces and 3 different keys in which to practice them. And that is a big practice list for a beginning young student that they can do on their own without adult supervision. Adult supervision is great, of course, but they can do it without. And then they can come back and they've basically been sight reading on their own. Every piece has a fun duet to play with them. So these pieces can be turned into recital performance pieces, or you can use them simply as ways to make the lesson more musical. And sometimes I might even just play the accompaniment, and the student doesn't even play, we just sing the words. So they're really beginning to develop an intimate relationship with making music. And it goes on like this, introducing concepts. The repeat is introduced with the option to include repeats in music, just like we did with tempo. We introduce mi, re, do next. These syllables are introduced, if you are familiar with Kodaly, in the order that they are traditionally introduced in the Kodaly method. And more songs, more opportunities to be creative with music, more opportunities to move around the keyboard. And we go slowly through this week by week, adding more and more songs, activities, and concepts until we get to the end, which is the song Wise Owl, which is based in the minor mode, and they can play this really extremely beautifully. And as you can see, it even has a bit of complex fingering because we're sharing a note, the hands are beginning to overlap, and it has beautiful rhythm and a repeat. So if you want, you can encourage them to do this instruction, which is to play an octave higher the second time. So these are all vast and rich musical concepts that they've been learning. The whole book takes about a term or a term and a half to get through, but it can take longer. It can take shorter depending on the age and the way music is coming to them easily, or if they need a bit more time. That's PianoForte Level 1, a little bit of an overview.